The Peace of Westphalia was signed in 1648 and sought to put an end to the 30 Years' War. The recognition of the Westphalian peace as the birth of the modern sovereign state system has indeed long been established. However, around the 1990s, the discipline of international relations experienced a shift when the broadly accepted theory of the Westphalian system began to be challenged. Due to the inconsistency of the historical facts and its Eurocentrism, ignoring the numerous events that had previously taken place and those happening during the same time in the rest of the world. While we recognize that the treaty symbolized a transition period in the 17th century, we agree that the centrality of the Peace of Westphalia creates a bias and a disparity between Europe and the rest of the international system, as contemporary IR theory remains caught in the notion that the West sets the standard for civilized human conduct. Because so many sorts of civilizations and alternative forms of international systems have been ignored, in mainstream IR theory, on our research we will go back millennia ago, focusing on the impact of the Natufian culture on IR. The Natufians constituted a society that lived 12,000 years ago in the Levant, and transitioned from hunter-gatherer to sedentary. This period is divided into early Natufians and late Natufians. They marked a major organizational departure from the old ways of life, and are considered to be the threshold to agriculture, a fundamental activity that led to the rise and development of civilization. This group shows a high level of social organization, and studies have shown that a zone of intensive interaction existed between communities in the Jordan Valley, as well as the first signs of an exchange network. While Natufians are not an isolated example, given the existence of other early cultivation centers, like central Mexico or the middle area of the Yangtze River, the Natufian culture did play a crucial role in the emergence of complex civilizations that would, over time, develop into the current international system.
Climatic oscillation during the Natufian. Chronologically, the Natufian period encapsulated extreme global climatic events. The early Natufian started beneath the somewhat adverse circumstance of the cold Older Dryas. This was followed by a transition to the Younger Dryas, cold event, which corresponded mainly to the late Natufians. The Prepottery Neolithic appeared immediately after the end of the Young Dryas, when the Holocene climatic regime began. The correlation of the early to late Natufian transition with the Young Dryas is complex. However, distinct experts do not forget that late Natufian started after the Young Dryas, due to the cultural changes and the late Natufian culture. Additionally, the shift in subsistence techniques and strategies and the geographical settings are crucial to understand the expansion of the late Natufian after the Young Dryas.
Vegetal and animal resources. These civilizations aimed to focus on specific species of cereals and vegetables, which resulted in them being experts on how to treat each resource correctly. The Natufian also hunted animals and gathered plants. They specialized in animals, gazelles, and vegetal species like cereals. The way they managed the collection of those resources shows how they knew how to work things out when it came to their economy, as the behavior that they had allowed them to have stability in space and time. They knew how to deal with resources, as for instance they collected acorn only just in case there was a famine, so it was a complement. And it could be said that they speculated and foresaw any probable issue that they could possibly have. They knew exactly when to collect what and where. For instance, they collected cereals between spring and summer, and they gathered acorns and nuts in the fall, as each place would have a different kind of resource, so their economy depended on that. Many specialists would say that the Natufians were qualified as a broad spectrum economy, which would mean that the economy is mixed and a consequence of the use of collective net hunting targeted toward gazelles, foxes, and hares. The other species would then be only secondary products, and that the overexploitation of the slow-moving game caused by an increase in human population would have forced the Natufian communities to exploit other resources, although more agile, such as partridges, and hares. The Natufian community and religion. The religion where the Natufians were from, the Levant, has given to the world the origin of the three most important monotheistic religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. It is fair to say that these religions might have their origins or roots in the Natufian culture, but there aren't many pieces of evidence of a religion per se in that period. However, they did have some religious habits and behaviors. There is evidence that in cave art from 15,000 years ago, the Natufians had ritual specialists that were called the shamans, and they were considered leaders of some kind. According to Richter, the Natufians had developed a complex symbolic cosmology and treated their dead with respect. So they already had the sense of a funeral that we have today. The fact that the figure of the shaman existed means that these cultures already had some kind of organized religion. These evidences found in caves show that their culture was undergoing ideological and socioeconomic transformations, which would possibly include spiritual ideas as well. The fact that they had shamans emphasizes how important for them their rituals had to be. Rituals are key elements to developing social roles in societies no matter how old the society is, as they enable communication and information exchange as well as integration of everyone. Although there isn't much archaeological evidence that the Natufian culture took part in rituals, currently it has been proven, as said before, some sort of funeral as ritual in a well-preserved grave of an unusual woman at the late Natufian site of Helazon, Tachet, Israel. This shows many stages of a funeral and performance, and therefore enables us today to imagine many actions that they would possibly do.
Natufians and their social organization. To define the Natufian as a complex entity based on wealth and diversity of material culture, as well as its novelty compared to early periods. Natufians are considered as large-sized population living in fixed and better defined territories, exploiting intensively their natural environment and with hierarchical social organizations of matriarchal type. Natufian people lived in communities, some quite large, of semi-subterranean houses. The largest Natufian communities were found in Jericho. However, smaller Natufian communities' evidence for them is scarce. The Natufians located their settlements at the boundaries between coastal plains and hills, in order to maximize their access to a wide variety of food and also for the protection of their community. Also, the nearness of other settlements and other communities played an important role of being attacked from other communities. Hence, inter-village warfare was present sometimes, but their defensive architecture and sort of military saved Natufians in many battles with other communities. Despite that, some Natufian groups were seasonally mobile, while some evidence of multiple season occupations, along with long-term reoccupations, long-distance travel and exchange. Also, the capacity for diplomacy emerged through the exchange of goods and materials with other communities, because some Natufian grave goods were found in long-distance communities, such as in the northern Israel. Also, the most seasonal known proof of beer goes back around the Natufian times. Some evidence was found in prehistoric cave near Haifa when researchers were looking for clues into what plant foods the Natufian people were eating. Likewise, the soonest proof for fermenting goes back to the Natufian times. For instance, grinding equipment, boiling stones, cooking rocks, and other items have been found in some Natufian caves. Brian Hayden says that the use of beer was more political rather than social. Hayden's hypothesis is beer played a primary role in attracting people to feast and making them effective mechanisms for creating political structures and power within communities. Beer can be used by hosts in a manipulative way, which means that maybe Natufian used beer for political reasons. On account of these investigations have enabled us to identify important aspects of the Natufian behavior, such as subsistence systems, stone tool making and usage, village techniques, and the variable use of Natufian shelter, home ranges and territories. Also, other material cultures of Natufian communities have been found, such as lithics, art, burials, Furthermore, we can state that the Natufian culture offered the understanding of process of hunter-gatherer culture, transformation, and their specific patterns of natural resources exploitations, in relation with the more sedentary use of domestic and regional space.
To conclude, we cannot deny the great impact that the Peace of Westphalia has had on the discipline of international relations. However, we defend that many alternative forms of civilizations and international systems existed millennia ago. As our research has shown, the Natufian culture was a highly complex society that greatly contributed to the development of agriculture and consequently to the future rise of civilizations and the current international system.